Hi, I'm Todd Pugatch from Oregon State University. I'm very pleased to share this work with you on entrepreneurship education and teacher training in Rwanda. This is joint work with Musa Blumbo from the World Bank. The background of this work is the difficult school-to-work transition of youth in Africa and Rwanda specifically. So most of the unemployed on the African continent are youth. In Rwanda, of youth who are employed, the vast majority of them are either self-employed or in family firms. So this means that for many youth, entrepreneurship is essentially a necessity because wage employment is more difficult to find. Because these youth are transitioning from school to the economy, schools can therefore play a major role in promoting the sort of entrepreneurial skills that can help young people succeed. Now, in Rwanda, entrepreneurship has been required as a secondary school subject since 2009, and that makes it, in the eyes of one observer, one of the most extensive efforts to promote youth entrepreneurship in the world. In 2016, that required entrepreneurship curriculum underwent a major reform. It went from a traditional knowledge-based approach to one that was more interactive in nature, focusing on students and building their practical skills. Now, such a dramatic change in the focus of a curriculum can be a challenge for many teachers who were accustomed to the more traditional methods, and that's what we're going to study, is a training and support program intended to assist teachers in making the transition to this new entrepreneurship curriculum. This is a 2-year program. It was focused on teachers and students in the upper secondary grades, 10 through 12. So our research questions are, how effective was this teacher training and support program in promoting entrepreneurial skills among students and in implementing the sort of pedagogical changes among secondary school teachers that the curriculum was intended to enact. We contribute to 4 different strands of literature on education systems in developing countries. One is the relatively large literature on teacher training, though the literature on secondary school teachers is fairly thin. The next is on improving teaching quality through pedagogical changes, through helping teachers implement curriculum reforms, and then finally the literature on school-based entrepreneurship programs, which is also fairly thin. So this new entrepreneurship curriculum is common to all of the schools in our study, and indeed all the secondary schools within the country. The curriculum was a more interactive approach to teaching entrepreneurship than the previous approach. And at its center was a teaching modality called skills labs. Skills labs are double classroom periods built on the laboratory science model, where the teacher introduces a concept that students are intended to grapple with in small groups to then work together and present their findings to their classmates at the end of the period. So this was a major change from the traditional lecture format of the previous entrepreneurship curriculum. The new curriculum also included encouragement of student business clubs. These are revenue generating businesses formed by students within their schools that was meant to practice those skills that they're learning in the classroom and launch their economic activity. The intervention was among a subset of schools in our study. It was a training program implemented through a partnership of the government and an international NGO called Educate. It had 3 components. One was an intensive teacher training that took place for full work days 3 times per year. The next was exchange visits among teachers in the program. So a small group of teachers would visit each other's schools 3 times per year to observe one of the teachers teach a lesson and meet afterwards to give that teacher feedback and share best practices among themselves. And then the final component was outreach and support from the NGO 6 times per year to assist the teacher with implementing the new curriculum and advise student business clubs in the school. The program took a train the trainers or cascade model approach, where initially it was the NGO delivering the trainings, but as time went on, the NGO trained government trainers, government teacher trainers to deliver the training, so that our results are immediately relevant for potential scale up of the program. Here's a photo of students engaged in a skills lab. You can see they've turned their desks to face each other. They're talking about the lesson, and they'll present their work at the end. Here's an exchange visit. Teachers are reflecting on what they saw in the classroom lesson that they previously observed, and learning from each other. And here's an outreach visit. An NGO staff member is showing students how to make soap out of materials that they can buy as a potential idea for a revenue generating business, or a product in a business that they could start on their own. The study design is a classic randomized control trial, cluster randomized control trial, where the unit of treatment is the school. We had 207 secondary schools in the study, split equally between treatment and control. Here's a map of the schools in the study. The blue squares are treated schools. The yellow circles are control schools. The gray shaded areas are the 11 districts in the study. Kigali, the capital, was not included in the study, so you should think of these schools as being largely rural, and in a few of the smaller urban centers within these districts. We collected data when the new curriculum was first being implemented in 2016, but before the program started, a baseline survey of students and teachers. And in 2018, we visited them again to conduct an end-line survey. In addition to attempting to find the 15 original students from the baseline and the classroom teacher, we also observed an entrepreneurship lesson directly, and students who were not in school were attempted to be contacted to reduce attrition. In 2019, we had a follow-up survey of students where most students were out of school at this point. They were scheduled to complete secondary school in 2018. I'll be showing some results from that 2019 survey today, though I should stress that these are preliminary results, as we're just getting our hands dirty with the 2019 data. Before I present those results, I should also mention that we followed an analysis plan in looking at the data. We had a theory of change that involved several different steps. So first, that teachers would adopt the curriculum, that teachers would alter their pedagogy in response. Students would acquire skills as they learned within this new curriculum, and then ultimately engage in entrepreneurial activity. And we have a set of hypotheses that we test according to our analysis plan for each of these steps in the theory of change. In addition to registering that analysis plan, it also went through peer review as part of a stage 1 registered report that was accepted at Journal of Development Economics. Here are the key findings, just to summarize them before I go into the details. And I encourage you to read the full paper, because ultimately this will be a bit of a surface treatment of our results. But first, we find that teachers, by and large, did adopt the more active teaching methods that they were asked to implement as part of the curriculum. We find some modest evidence of changes in student skills. And we find that economic activity changed as a result of treatment. Students in the treated schools participated more in businesses, but the flip side of this was that they were less engaged in wage employment. So there seemed to be some substitution between business activity and working for others in more wage-based positions. So some of the more specific findings, starting with take-up. Take-up was quite strong. The green bars that you see here are the treatment group, and the gray bars are the control group. So attendance at the trainings and exchange visits was very high. The control group attendance shows a little bit of contamination, but it actually wasn't active attempts by the control group teachers to attend these trainings, but actually just a misclassification of treatment and control schools through a miscommunication at the outset of the study, and you can see that it's quite minimal. Skills lab scheduling, which is a key measure of whether teachers were taking the curriculum back to their schools was considerably higher in the treatment group compared to the control group. You can see the control group had a difficult time actually scheduling these skills labs. So there was quite a barrier to implementing the curriculum in the absence of the treatment. And we also find an increase in entrepreneurship knowledge among the treated teachers. We find some interesting differences in active instruction as a result of the treatment as well. So the first 3 bars look at active instructional time as measured through a direct classroom observation using the Stallings classroom observation tool, which has been used in a number of studies over several decades now. The first set of bars, you can see that there's essentially no difference in active instructional time overall between treated and control schools. Over the whole lesson that we observed, we took snapshots every 4 minutes of what the teacher was doing and then classifying their behaviors into active or passive instruction. That active instruction time was essentially no different between treatment and control. When you look separately, though, at the first and second half of the classroom observation, so that's the second and third set of bars here, you see that actually treated teachers were spending less time in active instruction in the first half, but more in the second half. And this is consistent with the skills lab model, where the first part of the lesson is the teacher setting up the skill that students are going to practice, and then the latter half of the lesson is students engaging in group work and presenting their findings to class, which is consistent with active instruction. So this is evidence that the treated teachers were following that model more so than in the control schools. More targeted measures of active instructional techniques associated with the curriculum were also higher in the treatment group. That's the fourth set of bars. And then we also asked students themselves whether their teachers were engaging in these active instructional techniques. And we find this was more true in treated schools as well. That's the last set of bars there. We find some modest differences in skills. We looked at a range of skills. I'm showing you just a subset here of both cognitive and non-cognitive skills. We find an increase in grit to the tune of 1.1 standard deviations in the treatment group compared to the control. Not a lot of evidence of other changes in skills. So this wasn't across the board. And this is from the 2019 data. So again, take it with a grain of salt. There. Now, looking at economic activity, we find that treated students, when they left school, were more likely to be enrolled in a university program, 8 percentage points in the treatment group compared to 4 percentage points in the control, so that's a doubling. 5 percentage points or so more likely to be participating in businesses in the year that they left school. And those businesses were more likely to be non-agricultural, so some evidence that they were diversifying the sector of entrepreneurship. The flip side of this is that employment was lower in the treatment group than the control group, so that's suggesting some substitution between entrepreneurship and wage employment in response to the program. Now, if we look at income, we actually see that income is lower among the treated group than the control group. We are still looking into the reasons for that. An initial hypothesis we have is that wage employment is just a more secure form of income, particularly for young people just out of secondary school. And so this short-term difference might be a reflection of the more volatile income stream among entrepreneurs, as well as the greater likelihood that treated students are still enrolled in school, in university programs. We also see lower savings among the treated group. But again, these are fairly early days. We're hoping to track these students over a longer period of time to get a better sense of the long-run results. So in conclusion, we find that in response to an intensive teacher training and support program, teachers can change how they teach. And in this specific context of entrepreneurship curriculum, students can become more entrepreneurial, but increasing the overall level of economic activity can be more challenging. In terms of cost effectiveness, the program cost $24 per student per year. In terms of additional businesses created, that comes down to nearly $500 per business created. We'll see if that cost effectiveness calculation changes over the long run, as these are necessarily just short-term results. I'd like to thank the funders of this program from JPAL, Innovation Growth Lab, and IZA, our partners in the Rwandan Education Board, and Educate, and IPA, all of the research assistants and field staff and survey enumerators who collected the data for us. This was a tremendous effort. I would welcome any questions on this work, and again, encourage folks to read the full paper when it's available. Thanks so much.